Nika Case, welcome to The Right Note.
Thank you.
We can't escape it, the big news of the moment, Aretha Franklin's death. Do you remember the first time you heard Aretha Franklin?
No, because Aretha Franklin has been a constant in my life, my entire life. And I don't know, it doesn't feel right.
No. And in fact, it almost doesn't feel real because she's always been there. In a sense, she's always going to be there. But without necessarily being a big fan of hers or knowing her work all that well, did you ever take anything from her, from her singing, from her approach to life, to someone who wrote and produced her work?
Yeah, I mean, she's such a major force. I think she's one of those people like the Beatles who I heard all the time, and so I absorbed it, and I didn't have to look for it. So I have always taken Aretha Franklin for granted, at least until I started paying a lot more attention to women's roles in their own careers. And I wish people had been making documentaries about how much she owned of that career and how much she invested in what she did behind the scenes a long time ago.
Yeah.
Rather than just focusing on her as a singer. Because that's part of who she was. And I don't even want to say was, it feels so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, I can't imagine how it must have felt to be so ill. So I hope she feels better right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just like when people pass like that, I just can't help but feel like, oh God, I hope that's all gone. I hope they feel better.
Yeah.
But she's definitely someone who it's never going to seem like she's gone.
One of the interesting aspects of her is we think of her as the singer, as one of the greatest singers. But she was someone who, representative in the ways of the way women have had to work their way through this industry. She wrote songs. She played piano on most of her hits. She drove a lot of the musical direction, but she wasn't seen, wasn't recognised, and often wasn't allowed to do that in the way that she might have wanted to. Mm-hmm. You found more than enough difficulties in taking control. Without getting into the sort of women in music thing, taking control as an artist at the beginning of your career, it's almost impossible to do because everyone assumes you know nothing and you're not sure how much you can say. When did you start feeling able, and maybe it was right at the beginning, to say, this is what I want, this is how I want it done?
Well, I was always a real loudmouth about everything I thought, so I don't think I was capable of withholding anything like that. But at the same time, I think around 26 or so, I was being courted by a couple major labels, and I definitely would have signed with one of them. But they all decided that there was nothing in me that they wanted, like I wasn't marketable in some way or something. So I had to learn the business on my own at that point because I was already so invested in doing it, not like in a I'm gonna make it kind of way, but in I wouldn't have even said I'm a musician. I wanted to be a musician and I wanted to play music so bad that it wasn't even a question. But luckily for me, I was not signed. Otherwise, I don't know where I would be right now. Like I might not have come as far as I have because I had to learn what contracts meant. I had to book myself. I had to tour manage myself. I had to do all those things off and on here and there. And, I did get a lot of help from other people. It wasn't like I'm a self-made man or anything, but...
No self-made man or woman ever is.
No, but I'm really glad it happened the way it did. The thing that always chapped my ass was if you signed a record contract, what you do is you take a loan from the record company to make a record whose masters you have to pay them back for. Yeah. But then they own it and you don't. So that made absolutely no sense to me, and I thought there's got to be no other business where this is acceptable behavior. And it's not even remotely ethical. And then, right around that time, like late 90s, people weren't really making vinyl anymore. People were making CDs, yet there was a clause in your contract that said you had to pay this certain percentage to pay for broken acetates and vinyl that would come in the mail. And you're like, but there's no vinyl. What? So you'd need to go back in with a fine-tooth comb and like take those things out. So I didn't have to do those things with Mint, but with other people, I would have to go in and say, listen. And then I eventually, went to my lawyer and said, this is what I want. Looking for a new label. I'm like, I'm owning my masters. And I was told, there's no way you're ever going to pull that off. But I didn't give up, and I owned my masters, and I did licensing deals with labels, and I've formed a really good relationship with Anti, who I'm still with to this day. And I wouldn't have known any of that stuff if I had been signed by a major label when I was a young person.
Not only wouldn't have known, but also wouldn't have been given the opportunity to stake a position like that. And it's like you, I find it astonishing that the exploitation of people who should know better, or people around them should know better, and yet they're so starry-eyed that they will give up so much just to have that opportunity.
Yeah, and like I said, it would be nice to be able to go, yes, I'm quite the innovator and resisting that, but I didn't get to resist that until nobody wanted me to do that. So it's kind of funny. But you also need to realize that there's a difference. I mean, y'all being me, that do you want to be famous or do you want to be a musician? Like, there's a big difference. There are people who do both, but they're very rare. And me, I didn't have a supermodel body and face, and I didn't have the desire to play songs that I thought were stupid, or that I just had a really hard time taking on things other people wanted me to do because I was such a control freak. And not on purpose, it's just how I was. I was very, focused, like over-focused, like almost manic. And I had to make a lot of mistakes, I think. Like, it just was so necessary for me to make the mistakes to gain the immunity to be able to not be so worried about pleasing other people that you can actually make what you want to make. And I've been in a really nice place where I was able to work with people who were willing to give me creative control and loan me this money and make partnerships with me to do it. So I got lucky in many ways, but there's also this weird mythology in rock and roll that you're lucky to be here, which, sorry, nobody's lucky to be here.
Yeah. And, people make the most of that by exploiting people.
They do.
On that basis.
Absolutely.
The younger you, the younger Nico, I mean, how much of her is...
The louder idiot.
Yeah. Well, how much of her is in the character in Curse of the 1-5 Corridor? I mean, it's a song about encountering, among other things, encountering adulthood's weakest moments and rock and roll. How much of you is in that?
Oh, that's a totally autobiographical song.
That's a pretty frank exploration of mistakes and of watching someone who's made the mistakes before you, and in retrospect thinking there probably wasn't anything else I could have done.
It's just, I don't know, the reality that comes in and pokes a hole in the romanticism of your life, which is a very sad balloon to pop. There's a lot of mourning for that romanticism. But then there's also self-reflection that comes with that, where you realize you maybe did what was right for you. And if it had gone the other way now, you could see what happened. It's just a strange... There are times when our past and our present kind of intersect with each other, and you can actually see through to what that future would have been, and it's terrifying. It really is terrifying.
There's a great image in there. I was an eyelash in the shipping lanes. It's a great line, but it suggests insignificance.
Yes.
But how much of that story in the song is about realizing that while we're insignificant in the grand scheme of things, our actions have impact and meaning on people around us, that you know, we're not insignificant and the things we do aren't.
Maybe it's our self-perceived insignificance, or how insignificant we felt at the time, or ultimately how much influence you had over someone. But it's so difficult to be super specific about it, because one of the reasons the song was written, because it just needed this other language to describe the feelings of real genuine loss and just not remorse, but just grief. But this really odd kind of grief. It's not the kind of grief when you lose a parent or a loved one. It's this other kind of grief that is totally separate from that. It's this weird, it's not like basically, since I don't know what to say about it, that's the reason that
That's why it's a
songs are what they are, or art is what it is, because you have to use kind of collages of the different languages you have to go, this is what it is right here. And if you feel that weird little shivery feeling with a lyric here or there, you totally know what I'm talking about. That's totally what I meant. Or how you feel, and I wanted you to feel. You know, it's such a non-specific. Like, I remember in art school, I went there for 4 years, and I got 2 really great things out of it that I still use all the time. One is, you know, does my finished product translate to my audience what I wanted to say? Does it say, like, let's say I wanted to say, I like gray dogs, you know? And I spelled it with driftwood. If I go to the audience's side and I look at the gray driftwood shapes, and if I can read the words, I love gray dogs, or even, I like dogs, like a 60% ratio of yes, I connected is probably pretty good. And I can't remember what the other thing I learned from art school is, but I will remember it like right in the middle of another sentence. But
Please.
So that's
drop
kind
it
of
in.
what you're trying to do when you're writing a song, like that intention. And, you know, poetry is a strange thing that I never understood. I've always liked it, but I never passed English 101, so I never felt like it was any sort of, that would be like doing ballet to the young person that I was.
Yeah.
I would have been like, there's no way I can do that. I'm not trained for that. I'm not a rich kid. I'm not beautiful. Like, that's what, like, people do who are fancy. You know, that's not what scummy little white girls do, you know. So it's such a weird thing, but now I use it as collage in my job, which is like if I told the young person that I was that, they would just be like, fuck no. No.
Which is how it should be. I've never liked that bit where people say, you know, write a letter to your 15-year-old self or something. When I was 15 or 20, some 45, 50-year-old person, whatever, writing me a letter saying this is how it's going to be. No, that doesn't mean that doesn't register with me, because who are you? What do you know about who I am? Because I'm 15 and no one's ever felt like this before in the world.
Mm-hmm. I think it's more like just give your 15-year-old self a, you're doing okay, buddy. You're gonna
I think that's the
be
only
okay.
way.